For the real fun, I want to bring up my colleague and friend John Hill to make all this come alive and answer your questions. You're still here, thank God.
Put our hands together for Rob, right? So I am John Hill. I'm the higher education evangelist at LinkedIn. I travel to colleges and universities all over the world. I've been on a whirlwind tour over the last 3 years. Put that into metrics because we're a metric-driven company. I've traveled 800,000 miles in a plane over the last 3 years, spoken in 10 countries, spoken at 110 conferences in higher education. I've been to 168 campuses, 92 of the top 100 U.S. institutions, 147 of the global 400 schools. I've got a pretty interesting purview about how social media and higher education intersect. And I'll give you some of those insights as we go along today. But before we start on that, I want to give you a little bit of my background and take you way, way back. I'm originally from Boston. I was born in Boston. Anybody East Coast here? Go Red Sox. There we go. So I was born in a little neighborhood called Savin Hill, attached to South Boston. Any of you ever seen Good Will Hunting? All right, yeah, that was pretty much my neighborhood. It was beautiful. I just want to go kind of through how Boston I am, give you guys, paint this picture for you. I'm so Boston that on an annual basis, my family goes out and visits what you see on screen right now, the Dorchester Day Parade. Go ahead, Corey. Pop that up. There we go. And I hang with one of the classic icons of the East Coast, the Dunkin' Donuts mascot. Those are actually my two boys with me. I'm so Boston that when I was this age, my mom and dad used to take me to MIT and Harvard for behavioral studies. Not because they thought anything was wrong with me, but they thought the intelligence on those campuses would rub off. I don't know if that's actually happened. If I have any quirks, you can blame those institutions. But I'm so Boston. By a show of hands, how many of you have seen the movie The Departed? So Martin Scorsese film, Jack Nicholson, Leonardo DiCaprio. Remember Leonardo DiCaprio gets out of prison early in the movie. He goes to visit his cousin's house. He's with his aunt. They're in the kitchen. They're on the front porch. I'm so Boston that scene of the film was actually filmed in my grandmother's house. Whoa, yeah, that's pretty Boston, right? Reason I tell you this is the background that I come from. My grandparents were off the boat from Ireland. My grandfather was a postal worker. My grandmother was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was the oldest son, second oldest kid of 6 kids. The 8 of them lived on the top floor of this triple-decker in South Boston. It's 3 kind of homes stacked on top of each other, 2-bedroom. Savin Hill, for those of you who don't know, back in the 60s and 50s, when my dad was growing up in that time period, you aspired to graduate from high school. And if you graduated from high school, you went into the labor union. And that's what my dad was facing. That was the normalization of that area. Now, at 14 years old, my dad realized that that's not what he wanted to do. And he realized education was his way out of this neighborhood. At 14 years old, he went down to the Red Line station, the T station in Savin Hill, and sold newspapers and fruit to pay his way through a private high school, Boston College High School. I have a 13-year-old at home, and there's no way in hell he would do that. He ended up saving up enough money post-graduation of high school to go to 1 semester at Northeastern. He was going to study engineering. Ran out of money. It's Vietnam War era. Thought he was going to get drafted. He ended up enlisting in the Air Force to circumvent that. Ended up measuring weather patterns on a mountaintop in Bend, Oregon for 4 years. There's a small library there. He read every book in the library. Post-graduation, utilized the GI Bill to get his political science degree from UMass Boston. Now, he did a little work with somebody you might know, a political luminary, Tip O'Neill. And through that, started to realize the access to networks and opportunity if you knew the right people. There was a pullback by the Ivy Leagues in the late 70s trying to get more veteran voices in the classroom. And my dad got an opportunity to apply for the first executive MBA program at Wharton. He had an opportunity to do an interview, go down there. So he leveraged the family connections in Savin Hill, got a free Amtrak ticket down to Philly. Don't tell anybody that. And he ended up going through Grand Central Station in New York for the interview. At this time, he has me and my sister. He's met my mom. He's doing this all on his own. and stops in Grand Central Station in New York. And late 70s, this guy in a three-piece suit with golf clubs comes and sits next to him. And you can imagine this three-piece suit was probably lovely. But he sits next to him. My dad grew up in inner city Boston, never golfed a day in his life. Guy turns to him and says, "Hey, do you golf?" And like any good pre-MBA student would do, my dad says, "Of course I golf." They have a conversation. My dad realizes this guy's a pretty big deal. And about halfway through the conversation, he's under the understanding that this guy might be able to give him an opportunity. Hands him his business card at the end. This guy hands him, my dad, the business card at the end of the conversation. He ends up being the vice president of marketing for the Bank of New York. He says, "If I can ever help you, let me know." So my dad goes down to Wharton, feels the interviews go well. Next day, he goes to this guy's office, walks in, says, "Hey, you said if you could ever help me, you would." Guy loved his moxie, offered him a job. So we moved from a great place, Savin Hill, to another great place, Trenton, New Jersey. My dad took the train up to New York during the day, worked at the Bank of New York, went to Wharton at night. Post-graduation from Wharton, we moved to Michigan. He worked in the automotive industry for a couple of years. And then he ended up building his own business. Ran that business for 28 years. My parents are now snowbirds. They go from Michigan to Florida. They're retired. The reason I tell you this whole story, though, is what happened on the back end of this. My dad has 4 kids, least of which has a bachelor's degree. 3 have master's degree. They have 2 Ivy League degrees within that grouping. Married 4 kids, all with master's degrees. My dad's 5 brothers and sisters, 17 of them, 1 graduates from university, 4 attend university. If you want to talk about how higher education, university changes lives, I'm a living, breathing example of that. But if you think about that story I just told you, every step of the way my dad had to do everything he did through intuition. There wasn't a lot of support structure around it. And if you think about the approach that we've taken in the higher education initiative at LinkedIn, we are focused on access, letting people access. We're democratizing the access to networks, opportunities, communities, insights that can help them find you, can help them find jobs and opportunities in the organizations that you represent. That's high ideology, but we've been pushing this heavy for the last 3 years, and I'm going to give you guys an insight at some of the things that we've built. And if you take it all the way back, I'm going to jump into LinkedIn now. I'll start to show you some of the early issues that we had to face. And one of the number one things is representing students effectively within LinkedIn. Think about the LinkedIn profile. It's very resume-centric, right? It's very business-centric. If a student didn't have appreciable work experience, they had an empty syndrome on our platform. We had to fix that. Now, broader than that, 67% of our users are outside the United States. You're recruiting talent globally. You need to be able to access those people in the job search currency that they use. What does the rest of the world use as job search currency? The CV, right? So you have a resume-centric business profile that doesn't represent most of our ecosystem, especially when it comes to students. So one of the first things we did out of anything we could have done as the student initiative team at LinkedIn is create what we call student verticals. And this coincided with the build of verticals that people could add on their profile at the same time. Projects, languages, publications, organizations were all ads that you could do to your profile. We added these 5: honors, awards, test scores, courses, patents, and certifications. Anything a student could learn in the classroom, they could apply to their professional identity of record. And then we worked alongside our profile team to make sure that we had the ability to minimize, if you didn't have work experience, drag that section down and maximize the things you were learning in the classroom. Put your best foot forward, right? Now think about some of the data sets that are here that we could potentially use down the road. We have courses here. We could start to see the successful people you're recruiting into your organizations tied to specific courses. Think about longitudinally some of that data we might be able to derive out of that. It's pretty amazing. Now, it's one thing to have access to better professional identity of record on LinkedIn. It's another thing to have access to data on 300 million students. And this is where my work goes a little bit broader than just students. It goes on working with alumni development career services officers, make us useful, because if we're useful to them in higher education, they get more students on our platform. If they get more students on our platform, we're more useful to you. It's a perfect win on the ecosystem. So the next thing we had to do was give better insights into data. And we are beautiful in this regard. If we come up here to the advanced search, how many of you play around with the advanced search? How many of you play around with Recruiter? All right, so So advanced search, or open search for all users. I'm going to add third and everyone else. And let's do a little play scenario on how you can start to dig in data in LinkedIn. Who's the number one person you'd want to connect with in any company? Who's the ultimate decision maker? CEO, right? That wasn't a trick question. So I can come up here to title, type in CEO, and we'll scroll down a little bit. Whoops. There we go. So I'm not a Mac guy, guys, as you can probably tell. All right, so I do that search with CEO. In the US, 1,080,000 profiles come up. It defaults to current or past. Past were abject failures. So we're only going to look at the current CEOs. Now I can see 850,000 CEOs that have a profile on LinkedIn in the US. Name a university you went to. Did you go to Michigan State? Oh, you're awesome. You're my favorite person. Go green. All right. So type in here, Michigan State. We could do a search on that. And we can now see the 2,242 CEOs that graduated from Michigan State, how you relate to each one of them. Let's take it a step further. Let's name a location, anywhere in the US. San Jose is too easy. That's right down the street. Chicago. How about we'll pick a zip code, the only zip code I can remember, 90210. So come down here. Oh, everybody knows those guys. So search. 110 CEOs that graduated from Michigan State University that live within a 50-mile radius of the beautiful people down in LA. How quickly I just do that? 30 seconds? You know, think about this, guys. This represented some of the databases that your companies could build. Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies could build out databases, parse out information at this level, because they have the money to do it. The access to this type of information is now in the hands of the individual. That's a shift in access to data. Better yet, I can see the relationship I have with each one of these people. And so up top, you can see Mark, for instance, is a second-level connection, a connection of a connection. And real quickly, I want to play on one of the most beautiful things that we offer students is the visualization of their network and how they can leverage it to create opportunity. You and I are not connected on LinkedIn, but say you're connected to her and she's connected to her. Once you and I connect, you become a first-level connection. You become a connection of a connection, second-level connection. You become a connection of a connection of a connection, third-level connection. This becomes my relational map. One of the things we're working heavily with students on, with materials training on them, is how to network effectively on LinkedIn. We are where you build quality relational networks, not quantity relational networks. We are where business takes place. So it's important that I connect with you on 4 major affiliations. 1, friends and family. 2, university affiliations. 3, shared work experience. 4, volunteerism. Because that'll be a quality relational network that will get me to you. What's your name? Everybody give Stacy a round of applause real quick. Stacy is the most important person in the room as far as relational networking is concerned. She's a connection of a connection. She's a weak tie. Our CEO surmised that, or our chairman, Reid Hoffman, surmised about 85% of job opportunities through relational network come out of you. It's not who you know, it's who they know that creates that opportunity. Now you can visualize it through a platform like LinkedIn. But take this a step further. We wanted to build tools that made us even that much more indispensable into the institutions. So if I come up here, the second major thing that we did is build a dashboard of alumni by where they live, where they work, what they do. This is the alumni tool for Michigan State University, 210,000 people. It's where I graduated from. And right off the bat, I have the top 25 locations that your alumni go post-graduation, top 25 companies that employ your alumni, top 25 industries that they're in. If you think about this from an institutional level, we give them the ability to start to target the markets that they should do alumni engagement in. We give them lead lists for corporate engagement, for career services, the types of people who are already employing their students, and we can do it in seconds. They can't pull this data on their own very easily. And if you start to do walkthroughs on some of this, it's pretty amazing. Essentially, you get the alumni directory of the future. So let's pick one of the where they live on the left-hand side. Somebody throw out one of those locations. Chicago. So if I select Chicago, 14,000 alumni in there. When I select that, where they work and what they do just changed to reflect the alumni in that market. Let's pick what they do, right-hand side. Sales. Everybody needs salespeople, right? 2,400 people in sales. When I select that, where they work changes to reflect those positions. Pick a couple of those organizations or companies. Groupon? Where are they at? 31? So for Groupon, if I were a student interested in potentially working there, I have a list of the 31 people who graduated from Michigan State that live in Chicago, that work in Groupon, that are in sales, and how I relate to them, including year of graduation. Now, one of the beautiful things about what we provide to students, and they use us accordingly, are insights into network. Insights into the people that they can pick up the phone, give a call to, do informational interviewing, learn some insights into the jobs and the companies that they might be interested in working with based on the view of this data and playing off university affiliation. Very, very powerful. Now let's take it a step further. We talked about majors earlier. Your majors and my majors align very well. I graduated with a journalism degree, and my minor was in history. As my dad likes to say, I was allergic to money. And that panned out for a long time. I was a practicing journalist for quite a while. But if you think about how many students struggle to know what they can be when they grow up, it is a struggle for a lot, right? How many of you knew you were going to do what you're doing now when you graduated from college and university? You know, a handful of you, right? So it's just surprising. You don't get to see that pathway visually very often. So we added the ability to start to see, based on field of study, what you can be when you grow up. And if you think about this, this makes us even more useful to career services, who hear every day somebody come into their office and say, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Name a major that you would think would be very difficult to get a job out of.
Theology.
Political science. Awesome, I'll use political science. All right, so if I look at what they studied on the left-hand side, I've got field of study for that. Take this all the way down. By the way, this is all searchable. So there it is. 4,710 people who have studied political science. When I select that, if I scroll back here, I have where they live, where they work, and what they do. If you think about this, we have just developed a directory of dreams. Aspirationally, we can show you what you can be based on the major that you study within college and university. Fairly powerful, right? Now, this is the engine into a much broader opportunity for us, which was to create an ecosystem in higher education with 24,000 universities. So we launched a little while ago a tool that we call University Pages, or an ecosystem that we call University Pages. Let's search another one of your universities. UC Santa Barbara. All right, so you have actually one of the most beautiful campuses ever. Did you actually go to class? I wouldn't have. I know there's schools that I shouldn't have gone to. That's one, Pepperdine's the other. I would not have even gone to class. All right, so University Pages, an ecosystem in higher education. One of the things we know is the more useful and indispensable we become into the processes for colleges and universities, the more likely they will get more students onto our platform. And so if you look at this, this is the ability for administrative rights for a university to play around in our space. The university actually has people who post this information, intertwined with the information that we've provided here. So they had the logo, the imagery. This is rich media enabled. They can do video. They can start to show the culture of campus based through content. You notice the alumni tool finds a home. So right below that, I can see those insights baked in. I can see my connectivity, like we did with the CEO search. Those people I know on campus. Think about this for a prospective student. They can identify people in the network who might be able to give them insights on what it's like to go to school there. This is helpful for parents. This is helpful for people who currently work at the institution, students and alumni. Scroll down a little bit further. On the right-hand side, I've got an algorithm that we built called Notable Alumni. It shows the most socially successful alumni of an institution. We look at success patterns in LinkedIn, level of attainment, industry penetration, tie it to things like Wikipedia and Google search. We showcase the alums that have been successful. Again, aspirational tools for students to see what they can be if they go to school here or are they currently going to school here. Scroll down a little bit further. I have both the ability for alumni to post information and the institution to communicate and showcase the culture. Students can engage in this space, parents. And then we created an algorithm that I think is awesome called Similar Schools. It shows the most similar schools based on career outcome from an institution. We looked at geography post-graduation that people went into, the industries they penetrated. We looked at the types of jobs that they got and cross-compared that data that we have on 24,000 universities to show the universities that are most similar to this school. If you're recruiting UC Santa Barbara right now, we just gave you a list of 5 other schools that look very similar to UC Santa Barbara based on career outcome. It opens up through data the ability for you to derive insights to help yourself. Now, alongside of all of this work, we developed 2 other areas, and I'll wrap up. We created this student jobs portal, targeting those students who are on here looking at insights, specifically the jobs that you offer. Essentially, internships and jobs provided for free, targeting students in this space. The second thing that we did is we opened up the ability for students to learn more effectively how to navigate us. We created a microsite called students.linkedin.com that showcases step-by-step walkthroughs, videos about how to be effective in our area. Now, my role is to work with faculty and staff globally to aggregate audience, to target market, to communicate, to qualify developmental leads, to engage alumni, to redefine the job search to students and alumni. And it's economies of scale. If I help those faculty and staff understand how to use us effectively, they help students understand how to use us effectively. They train students how to get on our platform and navigate into opportunities to meet you. And that's the win-win scenario here. So I'll leave you with 3 things. As you guys engage with students, I know you run into this. By the way, I was in career services for 5 years, so I was the opposite side of the fence. A couple things that I'm well aware of. Students suffer from the inability of small talk. We have to work with them on that. That's something that I don't know if LinkedIn can help fully, but we are aware of it. Secondly, students traditionally haven't had the opportunity to derive insights like this to find you. And now they do, but this is in its infancy. We are still learning as we go along how to help you and help them connect and touch each other. But 3 things that I'll say, leaving some insights that you can bring home to students. 1, help them understand the importance of building a network before they need it so it's there when they do. The more you can reinforce it, the more it helps us help you. 2nd, help them understand the importance of building a quality relational network, not a quantity relational network. But 3rd, we are a directory of dreams. You offer the opportunities that they are unaware of. Help them dream big. Utilize us in that vein. The more that you can showcase to students what is out there in this platform, the more it will rebound to help you out as well. With that being said, I absolutely love you guys because you keep me employed. So keep doing what you're doing. And I think, Rob, we're going to take some Q&A now, right? Yep, I think we're going to take some Q&A. I am hyper candid, so I will give you probably more insights than I should, especially that I'm being video recorded. But I want you guys to be able to pick my brain on some of the things, the insights that I'm seeing. What I will tell you is we're starting to see some transformation in career services in higher education, getting a little bit more with the times and aligning with some of the tools that you're using within your system. So with that being said, thank you, guys.
Hey, one thing I wanted to say about the jobs stuff. I know you mentioned this, John, but the jobs on LinkedIn for entry-level hiring are free. And I know that some people say to me, I've talked to literally hundreds of employers, and they say, well, I don't want more volume. I want you to think about this. The jobs, not just because they're free, but they work like a can of Pringles.
Which I've been walking around with, and it's made me think about this. A can of Pringles in the sense that if they can just get one Pringle, right, they're going to want to know more. So if you're a company that's trying to extend your brand, think of our jobs as sort of either Pringles or ambient marketing vectors, whatever you're more comfortable with. But take advantage of that because they're free and they're Pringles. And who doesn't like that? It's a stretch, John. You know that.
No, my question was, how are you guys? Hello? Hi. How are you guys taking the opportunity to market this to like high school students
Yeah.
so that they're becoming aware of this?
Yeah. So obviously, we've had some really good success with students and young alumni. Current count that we're using is 39 million students and young alumni on the platform. For most of you, you're aware that in September we brought down terms of service to 14 plus. That opened up the door to do some work with secondary and high school students. We're not really rolling that out yet. We still have a lot of work to do on the college and university front before we start to open the door toward that. But I want you guys to think about kind of the broader play there that's available to us. Job search currency of record, right? Professional identity of record. How many of you still utilize a platform that allows resumes or CVs? You take resumes or CVs, right? It's everybody in this room. In order to replace the resume, and there's not a lot, you guys aren't fighting for the resume. There's really nobody backing the resume right now. You have to be where the resume originates. The first working age in the US is 14 plus. So I think it dovetails with both helping people understand the professional identity of record, but also from a university perspective, giving them insights on how they can look for universities that are a right fit for them based on the information that we provide. And so those are the efforts you'll see kind of coming down the pipeline.
I'll extend that by using an example of my son, which has just been, not to beat a dead horse, but he's this type of kid that is a super networker. He wrote the first published post from a high schooler on LinkedIn. 20,000 people saw it, and 200 people commented on it. This is when we were visiting UVA with his brother. And he's in the car doing all this, and he reaches out. He wants to go to UC Berkeley. That's his dream school. He wants to be on the swim team. So he reached out and sent the article to the head coach of UC Berkeley. This is like a top-notch team in the world. The guy responded to him just the other day. Literally responded to him, says, I've never had a high school kid send me an email, let alone with a copy of a post you wrote about, essentially about building a culture of performance in swim teams. So I think eventually it could be an amazing opportunity for all of us and our children.
Yeah, I want to speak to one other thing. We touched on it, and I had to go through it very quickly. I'm going to jump up here for a second. How many of you view endorsements on the candidates you're looking at? All right. So broader, coming from career services background, especially working with students, one of the things that was interesting to me is that students had the inability or struggle with telling their professional story in front of you and really tying it succinctly, knowing who they were. And part of that is they just haven't fully formed at this point as a pre-professional. But if you think about endorsements, real quickly I want to do something. By show of hands, how many of you have been endorsed for a skill or expertise by somebody in your network who has no idea you have that skill or expertise, right? We know there's work to do there. But if you think about it in aggregate, if you think about this in aggregate, this is one of my buddies. He's a serial entrepreneur, starts a company like every 6 days. If I were to have him in the room right now, he would tell you he's known for entrepreneurship, leadership, startups, fundraising. His network is reinforcing who he is as a professional. What that's also giving is college students who haven't historically known what they're known for or how people view them, the ability to start to see what their personal professional brand is based on their network responding to them. That allows them to layer this information into their unique selling proposition, essentially their elevator pitch. They can put this on their summary. They can bring this into you as they're talking to you in the interview setting. So it's insights that they can derive out of this, and it's up to us to help them understand how to surface that.
I have a question about college students and having complete profiles.
Yes.
Any initiatives that you're creating to help that? I mean, every time I screen a student, I go to their LinkedIn profile.
Yes.
And at the end of the phone interview, I'll say to them, I just sent you a connection request for LinkedIn, and you just told me all these great things about yourself. Why is it not part of your profile? I mean, how do you, what steps would you take to help increase that?
So this goes back to the Jerry Maguire help us help you scenario. How many of you recruited on campus in the last 6 months? All right. So you're intersecting with career services people on a regular basis, reinforcing the importance of having things like complete profiles and LinkedIn profiles. Like if you think about it, that conversation, LinkedIn as a conversation wasn't even happening on university campuses 5 years ago. So if you think about how quickly that narrative changed, they understand that it's important to start looking at helping students apply, fill out their profile on LinkedIn. But you help reinforce that because you're essentially their consumer and they're aware of that. So the more you go onto campuses to say that type of thing, that it's important to have fully baked profiles, and we'll reinforce it through our marketing channels, but it would be great to have your help as well.
And you'll see some companies doing this not as a kind of the helping us help you thing. A friend of mine, Tyler, in Red Hat in the Czech Republic, competes with a lot of different big companies. Red Hat competes with Google and so on. And there's 3 major universities. You've probably been to all of them. But essentially what she does is she not require, but suggests that they apply or use the check-in product or connect with them via LinkedIn. The reason for that is she wants all the information about did they take Python programming or whatever. So that's a way, essentially, that it helps you and it helps us, but it's something that really sets apart the people that are willing to go and complete that profile. So there's actually ways to harness that effect, I think.
Employees seem much more willing to provide information about themselves to LinkedIn than they do to the company they work for.
Yeah.
So if you think about our internal profiles that we have, we call it at Verizon, it's about you. And the struggle to get employees to give us information on alumni, things like that. So when we're looking to build out our school teams, we're trying to figure out who went to what school, et cetera. So we've tried to entice them by saying you can use your internal profile to apply for jobs internally, and that's moved the needle a bit. But I'm interested in the corporate inquiries that you've maybe gotten to pull from employees' LinkedIn profiles to populate our internal profiles.
So you want our data. I know how this works.
Stay away from our
allowing-
data.
So here, I'll do a handshake. I'll do a handshake right now. I'll give you all the data that we have on your employees if you'll give us all the data in your database.
Sold.
All right,
No,
perfect. You'd be the first person to agree to that.
Your CIO is going to love that. Your EVP is going to love that, pal.
So what you're reflecting is actually a challenge with universities as well. If you think about the schools that you went to, their alumni associations, they're trying to get you to add data into their very, very isolated databases. And by a show of hands, how many of you have been solicited by your institution in the last year to provide information to the university? Phone call, mail, things like that. How many of you have actually updated that information? You're like a lone wolf back there. But this is the problem that they have. And we have more updated data. And to take you a step further, I showed you Michigan State University. I used to work there before I came to LinkedIn as well. And we were trying to figure out ways to socialize our alumni data, take the behavioral information from, say, Twitter or LinkedIn and Facebook, attach it to the transactional records we had on when people graduated, or what money they given to the institution, what events they attended. And our primary communication channel was email. We only had 160,000 email addresses on the 420,000 alumni from the institution. LinkedIn has 211,000 students and alumni. It's a broader, bigger communication channel to the alumni of the institution itself has. That's a shift, right? Now, the challenge goes back to what you were saying. If we were to provide your employees' data directly to you, if you think about those 850,000 CEOs, if we were to give their data away, what would they do? They would leave. We don't become usable if that's the approach. So we've got to figure out ways to work in conjunction. It's the beautiful thing about the Higher Education Initiative, though. Think about your relationship with your institution. And I'll put it in context. Take yourself out of your recruiter roles right now. Think about graduating from the universities that you did. By a show of hands, if a student were to reach out to you as a person, not a recruiter, reach out to you and say, I want to learn a little bit more about who you are and what you're about. If they were to make that phone call to you, by a show of hands, how many of you would take that call? And if you don't raise your hand, you're going to hell. The point is that there is visceral connection to the institutions, which gives us a little bit more latitude than it would be from an employer perspective. So that's why you can see that we can do just a little bit more view on some of the information here, because you do have that intrinsic connection back to the institution that we can work with.
John, we got a question from Twitter. Andrew at World Vision Interns asks, what trends are you seeing within career services or career services functions across the world?
Oh, wow, that's a great one. All right, so you're aware, I'm at LinkedIn John on Twitter, JOHN, and I'm happy to extend answers and take more questions after this. So a couple of the interesting things, how many of you are familiar with UCSD? Anybody go to school there? All right, so you're familiar with it though. Great school in the Cal system, San Diego. They've recently folded some of the functions of career services under alumni. And so what they're doing is trying to mobilize their alumni base to create more opportunities for students. I think that's fascinating. Personally, like to watch from outside, a lot of the verticals within Higher Education Act siloed. So alumni doesn't talk to development, doesn't talk to career services, doesn't talk to marketing, communication, PR, social. This is an instance where I think they're heading in the right direction because the alumni base is the best base of people to engage to create opportunities for students. Internship or experiential opportunities. Globally, it's interesting, I think, like the White House scorecard, post-graduation destination survey information that may end up being required out of career services offices is going to change the type of people who are hired into career services. They're going to have to be more marketing business oriented. And you know, one of the things that you see in career services, a lot of people, they love what they do, they're great, but they grew up as lifelong academicians. And it's hard for them to position people for jobs in Silicon Valley or investment banking if they've never done that type of work. So it's neither here nor there, it's just where the structure is. But I do see maybe more people like yourselves ending up in roles in career services as there's more business applications tied to the data that they have to collect.
Yeah, and in fact, I know a couple institutions in California had reached out to me, the career services folks, saying, I want industry people that know whatever, startups, technology, whatever the healthcare, whatever the industry is, I want them to help my students. And that's what you're talking about, essentially.
Yep. Yeah.
You said you spoke to a lot of faculty.
A lot.
A lot. And in my experience, a lot of faculty don't see it as their jobs to help their students find jobs.
Yep.
So do you see that changing, or what's your secret?
Yeah, so I would say that primary audiences for me are the staff that work in those non-academic units. Because if we connect into their processes for helping students figure out how to find jobs, if we're connected into alumni engagement, if we're lead generation for funding for the institutions, they infuse us into our processes, we become indispensable, they use us repetitively. It's kind of a win-win scenario. And then they pull students and alumni into the platform even further. Yeah, it's, what was the original question? I'm sorry, I circled back.
Professors.
Oh, faculty. See, that's why I tried to block it out. All right, so here's our challenge with faculty. It's a lot of work for a more difficult result to be able to metric. We can see the needle being moved if we work with career services heavily because more students get on the platform for jobs, right? On a faculty, I think it's, like you're saying, hit or miss. You have faculty members that are proactive, that see student as part of what they do. You have others that are on tenure track that are interested in research and development, have no interest whatsoever on the student side of the fence. And it's just the state of where higher education is right now. But that being said, they can also be some of our most powerful advocates. So I just did NAGS, which was the Northeastern Graduate Schools Conference in Toronto. And these were deans from all the colleges and universities. The group that you would say would probably least likely understand how to use us from a practical standpoint. And they absolutely got the fact that we have better alumni on their fields of study. And where they see opportunities is to engage those alumni that have gone into the areas post-graduation and pull that insight back into the classroom for mentoring or networking or for classroom engagement in person or virtual. So they get it. They do understand it. It's just a little bit tougher to get into the day-to-day process with them.
Hey, thanks for having us. Appreciate it. One a question from, we got one more.
I was just going to add one thing to that. Sorry, I'm Omar. I work with John. We are actually actively monitoring some of the trends we're seeing on campus happening with faculty. Increasingly, professional development type courses being offered on campuses, places like Villanova, University of Tampa. We're following that closely because we think there's a big opportunity there. And I recently just did a survey of career services professionals, 2/3 of whom are saying they're actually going into classrooms and trying to sort of work that curricular integration front. So potentially some real opportunities there, especially as higher ed has to sort of prove the ROI of students coming on campus. So definitely hear you and something we're looking at.
Great. Thanks again for having us. Thanks, John, so much for your insights. Appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Hey, really quickly, the organizers of this event put a lot of time and effort in this, and then those guys are like the hidden heroes back there, but spent the whole day with us, so if you can give them a round of applause, that'd be awesome.
All right.